Hi everyone, welcome back to Ubushabami. I'm Khabonina Matsebula for those of you who don't know, and we are a sexual and reproductive health organization. So if this is your first time joining us, we are currently busy with the month of March and we have monthly campaigns. Last month it was mental health and this month it is human rights. So personally, I feel like with human rights, the most important thing is to know them because if you don't know them, then how can you exercise them? And then secondly, the most important thing is to always exercise your human rights. So we have about 30 universal human rights, and it obviously differs from country to country and constitution to constitution, but we have a blueprint of human rights and there's 30 of them. I will link the link of where you can read them in my description box below. Wow, that was a mouthful. But I will link them in the description box so you can check them out. So when I was thinking about what exactly am I going to speak about with human rights, because when you think about it, it's pretty basic, it's human rights. It's the right that every human being is owed when they are brought into this world till the day they leave. So I thought to myself that something that I've noticed in our society is that people don't necessarily exercise their human rights to their full capacity. Most people tend to just go with the wind where human rights are irrelevant. So for example, if you see something wrong or you see somebody's human right being violated, most people have a tendency to just do what everybody else is doing. Or people will bring light to a certain issue that maybe is a human right. For example, somebody passing suddenly, or somebody being murdered by their ex-boyfriend or their current boyfriend. People will use that as an opportunity to play an activist or somebody that is against gender-based violence or is against the abuse of women and children. But at an everyday life or at an everyday level, are people actually practicing the same things that they appear to practice when there's a huge spotlight shown to certain issues? And I think the answer to that is no. A lot of people forget, some people don't even know what their human rights are. And if you don't know what they are, then surely you can't be practicing them in your everyday life. So I think the biggest thing is for people to actually know what human rights are so that they can practice them and they can actually help themselves and sometimes help the next person. This actually brings me back to a video that I saw on TikTok of a woman who was basically explaining what society has done to so many people. So I'm just going to give you a short story time of what she spoke about and how I think it's very relevant to what is actually happening in society today. So she basically spoke about a lesson that she learned in high school where she had this teacher who was a very bubbly, lively person, very kind, very outgoing. And one day they got to his class and all he said was, "Be quiet, get into my class, sit down and say nothing." And he had changed the orientation of the classroom into a circle. And so all the tables were seated in a circle, and in the middle of the circle was another table. And on this table was a goldfish in a bowl. So all the students came in, they all sat down. And then once they sat down, he walked straight up to the bowl, he took the goldfish out and put it next to put it on the table next to the bowl. So now the fish is outside of the water. And then he left the classroom. He said nothing to the students, and obviously the students sat there all looking at themselves like, what is going on? Like, what do we do, This is, number one, very out of character for our teacher. Number two, there's now a goldfish that is outside of the bowl that is flapping and flopping for its dear life. What do we do? So a minute went by, they did nothing. Another minute went by and they did nothing. And 30 minutes later, a student stood up, and was fed up and was just like, "I'm not going to sit here and watch this poor fish die." Took the fish and put it back into the bowl. And then the teacher came in and said to the classroom, "Look at what society has done to you." They clearly saw that what he did was wrong. They clearly saw that the way he's behaving is abnormal, but nobody said anything and nobody did anything. everybody just kept quiet and went with the flow. And I feel like it's very similar to what happens today in society. We see people's human rights being violated every single day. If it's not the right to life, if it's not the right to healthcare, education, equality, freedom, and a lot of people don't say anything or do anything about it. So, this brings me back to another incident that I actually experienced when I was in my second year of working. So for background, I'm a clinical associate and I work in the public healthcare sector, and I worked at a hospital. Should I say the name? I don't know if I should say the name, but if you know me, you know where I worked. But I worked in a hospital, public hospital, for about 5 years. And in my second year of working there was an incident of... So I was working in casualty. So casualties is like an emergency room. It's very high pressure. It's literally go, 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 go from the moment you arrive until, the moment you leave. And depending on who you're working with or the day of the week that it is, it can be even more frustrating. So on this particular day, it was a Saturday. It was super busy, month end. We literally have patients coming in from the morning when we got there from 8 until the very next day. So 24 hours, we literally have patients coming in. And one of the doctors that I was working with got very frustrated with the patient. And I think the frustrations came from, number one, being understaffed and being in such a high pressure environment. Number two, having a language barrier with the patient that he was, trying to assist. So I was in the cubicle next to him, and I could hear that there's a bit of a bit of commotion, a little bit of, voices raising, and, the patient trying to speak, but eventually not saying anything to the doctor because I think they were intimidated. Eventually, people started to come to the cubicle. Well, not people, healthcare providers, so nurses and other allied healthcare workers, trying to figure out what's going on, how can they, assist in the situation. Eventually, I decided to go there. So when I got there, I realized that, okay, number one, my colleague is very flustered, very irritated, and is not speaking to the patient in the best manner that he should be, as a healthcare provider. And that made the patient way more reserved and shy to actually speak about their problem, because number one, he's a male, she's a female, and the problem was a very intimate problem, So I then said to him that, look, the way that you're speaking to her is making her feel intimidated. You're speaking English, she doesn't understand English fluently, So how about you go continue with the patient that I'm seeing, and then I'll take over from here and see how I can assist her. And if I need your assistance with anything, then I'll call you, because he was my senior. All right, so we did that. Eventually, we ended up assisting the patient. Fast forward a year later, the same patient lands up in my department that I'm working in at the time. And she recognizes me and comes up to me and she says, "Hi, do you remember me?" And I was just like, "Girl, I see so many patients a day. I do not remember you." And she was just like, "You helped me so much and I'd like you to help me today." Fortunately for her, I could help her. So I took her file, we sat down. Then she started to tell me the story of the events that happened that day. And I started to remember a little bit, but because we see so many patients, I couldn't remember on the spot. But later on that day, I was like, oh my gosh, I actually do remember her. I was working with such and such doctor, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. But anyway, moral of the story is, because I stood up for her rights, I made an impact on her life, and it actually inspired her to do the same in her everyday life. And she told me that whenever she sees something that she doesn't like, or she sees somebody being treated unfairly, she automatically feels like she needs to say something and she needs to do something, because she was also once in that position and she did not like how it felt. And if it went for me that day, she doesn't know where she would have ended up. She would have probably gone home without even having her condition checked out and being assisted. So basically what I'm trying to say with these stories is that it actually, number one, it does go a long way to speak up about, human rights, and to speak out when somebody is doing something wrong, calling out people when they're doing something wrong, is something that needs to be a norm in our society, because at the moment the norm is going with the wind, and most of the time going with the wind doesn't really get us anywhere. If anything, it sets us back. As a very clear example that I can remember of, there was a strike, can't remember about what, but they burnt down a library, and this library was the main information hub for a school that was nearby. And now that library is burnt down, the school is now suffering because the children no longer can complete projects and, get information and go and study. Now their rights to education has been taken away just because one person or maybe two people in a crowd of 50 decided, hey, let's burn the library. I'm pretty sure in that crowd there were a few people that were like, maybe we shouldn't burn the library, but because they're going with the flow and they're going with the crowd, they decided to burn the library anyway. And now, as a result, children's education is being impacted. So yeah, that is my talk about human rights. I think two things that you should take away from this chat, I think I've been saying it since the beginning, is number one, know your human rights. Know them. There aren't that many. There's 30 universal human rights. And like I said, depending on where you live, your country and your constitution, there might be less and they might be a little bit different, but it's important for you to know them so that you can exercise them. And by exercising them, you automatically help society become a better society. So yeah, I really hope that helps you guys, and I hope you guys have a fabulous March. Please stay tuned on our YouTube, our TikTok, and our Instagram pages for content that we're going to be dropping throughout the month of March. And you guys be safe and take care. Bye.